Here we have a 2024 Honda Accord buying versus leasing over 6 years. By the way, if you haven't automated your car payment, check out the automation blueprint in the description down below if you want to set it and forget it along with the rest of your financial life. I'm going to show you the exact numbers, the depreciation costs, and the money that you'll actually spend. So buckle up. Okay, first let's start super basic. Vehicle MSRP. Maybe you've heard that, maybe you don't know the acronym. Manufacturer's Suggested Retail Price. There you go. So if this is your first time learning that, do me a favor and click that like button so I know. Okay, in this example, you can see the image here, the 2024 Honda Accord price new from a Google. We're gonna round that up to 28,000 and use that for our comparison. So we've got 28,000 as a base manufacturer price for buying as well as leasing. As you can see, we're looking at 6 years at 7%, leasing 6 years at 7%. Pretty simple stuff so far, right? When it comes to buying, in this example, we're just doing an industry average down payment of $3,360, so $3,360 compared to an industry average for leases. Now, one thing you'll notice here in this chart is that the lease is going to be 2 3-year leases, which means we have a down payment for each of those 3-year cycles. So $2,750 times 2 is $5,500. Okay, so that's for 2 3-year leases again. The loan amount on the buying side is 28 grand minus the down payment, which means we're going to be financing $24,640. Awesome. On the leasing side, guess what? There is no loan, because you're effectively renting the vehicle, just as a heads up. Now, I won't bore you with the loan formula here on the monthly payment. The monthly payment is gonna be $420.09 at 7% versus $252 per month for the lease. And just FYI, that does cover depreciation as well as interest. So just a friendly heads up. When you're looking at these numbers, you might think, oh, what a great deal, $252, and we'll soon find out the truth. But the reality is you are paying for the depreciation on a lease, just so you're aware. So again, the total monthly payments are $420.09 over 72 months, aka 6 years, is $30,246 over that 6-year period. Conversely, 252 at 72 months is only $18,144. So pretty big savings right off the bat, it looks like, for the lease, right? Now, we want to examine our total cash out. So when it comes to buying, the down payment plus the total cost of the vehicle is $33,606. Conversely, when it comes to the lease, we've got the down payments twice, right? So $5,500 plus the $18,144 is $23,644 all in. However, this is where things get interesting. When you purchase the vehicle after 6 years, it's still worth something. You still own it. You still have an asset. In this example, we're looking at basically 60% off the original MSRP. We'll talk more about depreciation and the value and how that goes down over time. So we're looking at a price of $16,800 versus $0 in the lease, because again, you don't have a vehicle. You don't have that asset. You've just been renting the vehicle this whole time. So now we need to go a level deeper. When we look at the purchase of the vehicle, the $33,606 all in minus the asset $16,800 value is basically $16,806. So you could say that's the real cost associated with the ownership of the vehicle at this point in time. Conversely, on the lease side of the fence, it is going to still be that $23,644. There's no asset here in this example, so just kind of bear that in mind. So at the bottom of this graph, we see the financial advantage, $23,644 minus $16,806. So we're taking the cost of leasing minus the cost of the vehicle ownership, and we basically have a difference of $6,838. So again, this is obviously like in a vacuum. So at the beginning of this example, on paper, we see a $1,238 cost. In working to film this YouTube video, I am working with a team that's helping me crunch these numbers before I even read them off to you. And my first thought was like, not a huge difference, to be frank. However, this is the starting point. The more expensive the car you have, the bigger that gap is typically gonna be. And so obviously, like a base model Accord is not the most expensive car on planet Earth. Now again, a couple things to consider. This is like the initial cost on paper. Real life, as you're gonna see later in the video, is gonna be a little different regarding leasing versus buying. But on paper, even in this example, you can see like, hey, leasing doesn't sound so bad that I have like this brand new car that I keep rinsing and repeating over time. And by the way, you can check out your exact vehicle's numbers at cars.usnews.com. So one thing we touched on was depreciation. So that basically means in layman's terms that when you buy a brand new car, it is a declining asset. It is going to go down in value, except for like very rare instances. I can't even think of like a good example right off the top of my head, but probably an exotic car would be a good example. Some of those increase in value over time, assuming they're not like run into the ground, obviously. But by and large, depreciation means your car is going to lose value just by being old. Obviously, you add miles to it, it's going to accelerate that. The top tier Honda Hybrid Accord, the most expensive model, assuming, $37,643, that's the original price, you can see each year, boom, 24% depreciation. I'm not going to read through all those numbers for your sake, but basically 24%, 30, 37, 39% depreciation, so 40% depreciation roughly by the end of year 6. This is one of the biggest reasons why, if you read a book like The Millionaire Next Door, one that I reference here frequently, I feel like, the average millionaire buys a car that's typically 2 to 3 years old. By year 3, the vehicle has lost 31% of its overall original value, but it probably still has plenty of life left. And so you want to find an equilibrium where you can still drive the car for a good amount of time, get the value, extract the value out of it, and then sell it before it starts having too much mechanical trouble. Typically would be the value approach to buying a vehicle. And you can probably go on to see that if we go too far down this kind of curve, or can buy a vehicle, like I made the mistake in my earlier years of buying a car with like 200,000 miles for a few $1,000, and then got a little surprised when it, shit the bed on me, unfortunately. So just keep those kind of things in mind. You want to find the equilibrium where it makes sense. And so this is why millionaires oftentimes buy like a 2 to 3 year old car in cash. And even as I say this, you might be thinking, wow, that must be nice to buy a car in cash. And we can obviously have longer conversations and more detailed videos about that. And again, let me be clear. So most of my 6-figure clients are probably not paying cash for vehicles. By and large, they're doing a car payment. Oftentimes we don't even really get into this minutia on coaching because we're solving other problems. But I think one of the things I say as a coach is we want to understand what's optimal and then get as close as we can without shame or guilt. That doesn't do anything for anyone. But right now, maybe you're doing a car payment, but we could get to a place where in the future, you're investing dollars to be able to fund this so that you have the cash available. And it's just like a no-brainer to be able to do that moving forward. So going back to the lease, I mentioned earlier that it's like really the numbers on paper, not that big of a difference on paper, but when we add reality into the mix, the story changes a little bit more. We know that if you go over, let's say a 10,000 mile limit for the lease, you're going to be paying, could be 25 cents a mile. The averages are about $500 extra per year per driver. So you can see how that adds up over a 3-year period, or in this example, over a 6-year period. Wear and tear, $300 to $800 on average. Early termination fee if you need to trade it in early for whatever reason. Obviously in this example, not really applicable, but just to keep in mind, gap insurance. So if your vehicle is worth less than maybe it was intended to be in the initial contract, you might be paying more out of pocket for that, or you're going to be paying more out of pocket for gap insurance. So lease inspection fees, I don't even know what the hell this is, to be frank, but looks like could be $595 times 2 over that 6-year period. So these costs can easily add a couple more grand to the total over this 3 or 6 year period. So we just have to be aware of all those gotchas. I mean, what happens if you want to go on a road trip and now that's over your lease and I'm sorry, we can't go on the road trip anymore, or now you have to have an additional expense of renting a car. So for people that, obviously there are certain scenarios where leases make sense. I'm not poo-pooing them entirely, but just things to keep in mind. Let's talk about some scenarios where this does make sense. Like this is a great example in my opinion. If you are a real estate agent and if you are, I hate this phrase, fake it till you make it, but in some cases, like there are some rules to the road here, dressing well, and maybe that's challenging. And so you have to like buy your first suit on a credit card so that you can like get the job interview and land the job, as an example, silly example. But even like for real estate agents, if you want to like look like legit, like, oh, this is a successful real estate agent driving around in their BMW SUV or whatever, like I can kind of make sense. And that can soften the blow on a monthly cash flow outlay to be able to lease a vehicle this way, assuming you're not covering this massive territory and driving all through the country and, racking up 25,000 miles a year or something like that. So if you're in a season of life where maybe you're like, oh my gosh, we just need a safe vehicle because we've been doing like the junk cars, I get that. I've got, an 11 and 8-year-old. I've had like, children that were babies, and I can understand as a new parent or whatever, the fear around that stuff. Again, if you drive not a ton of mileage, maybe 10,000 or less a year, then hey, maybe at least could be a fit. But I think there's something called the ego gap we need to address, which is like, if you just want to look cool at a stoplight, I would rethink that, quite frankly, because no one cares what you're actually driving. And like, to prove my point, 69% of Americans have less than $1,000 saved. So many people have these big fancy cars and everybody's broke. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to throw in another comparison here in the mix. Option one, I mentioned this in passing, like buying a 2 to 3 year old car. You know, this is kind of like the millionaire playbook. So if we buy this 2 or 3 year old car, like we're kind of going back to that $24,000 Honda example. So call it $22,000 for a quality used vehicle. Maintenance over 6 years, $3,500. Vehicle value after 6 years, $14,000. So 36% depreciation. So the net cost is $11,500. So again, we took the $22,000 purchase, added in the maintenance cost minus the depreciation, and your average annual cost during this time is like $1,970. So $1,917. Again, that's the average annual cost. Obviously not in the first year because you got to fork over 22 grand. So obviously that's not lost on me. Option two, buy the new car, keep it for 6 years. So total upfront payments, $33,606. All these numbers we just went over, right? Maintenance over the 6 years is maybe $2,000, much of that covered by the warranty. And 6 years later, the vehicle value would be $6,800. Again, referenced in the table above. The net cost, remember, after we subtract out the remaining value of the vehicle, is $18,806 is the net cost. So the average annual cost, $3,134. So not terrible, not the end of the world. Option three is the most expensive. So we've got the lease, you don't own the vehicle, and after 6 years, again, this is the conservative estimate, just so we're clear. Your average cost is going to be $4,357. So probably closer, you could say, I don't know, a little bit more than that. That would be my guess. So the clear winner is buying used, again, in the sweet spot of depreciation, even factoring in maintenance, is going to be a better deal. Obviously, we could argue that the headaches you incur on the maintenance front might not be worth it. That's probably a separate conversation over an adult beverage, ideally. But again, going back to the millionaire formula is typically buying used and riding that bad boy out as much as possible. Like literally one of my mentors has, I think, a Lexus like 230,000 miles. He's making, you know, 6 figures a month. He could easily buy a new vehicle and just is riding this thing out because it's just a depreciating asset and not putting any more money in his pocket. But everybody's different. You know, and again, no judgment either way. You know, one of the last notes in this video is the psychological challenge of driving a car for a variety of years. And so like I'm dealing with that right now. I have a 2011 Acura TSX wagon that my son, when he was very little, drew green crayon on the ceiling that like every time someone gets in the car, they love to tell me about that. There's got a ton of quirks with it, like the Bluetooth that connects to my phone, because like this guy is listening to an audiobook at 2x speed 100% of the time I'm in the car. It's like cutting in and out and driving me crazy. And I'm on the cusp of spending a couple $100 to get like a better head unit so that it has like Apple CarPlay, so I don't have to deal with that anymore. But then I've got this undercarriage thing, this like plastic like protector of the underside of the vehicle that's like kind of come undone. And I had to zip tie it in place recently, and it's very embarrassing because it was like dragging on the way home from Florida recently. I'm sure I can think of a few other things that are wrong with the vehicle. But yeah, it's got 177,000 miles. I'm not sure what the total lifespan of this thing is going to be. So I'm going to ride it out for probably another few years and just hope for the best while saving money, being prepared to buy another vehicle in that time. No big deal. If you want me to help you automate your finances so you can free up this cash flow to do more of the things you want to do without the need for constant budgeting, click the link in the description and go ahead and book your call today. Cars are just one of the ways that people are getting robbed every day. The system is flawed and set us up for failure from day one. In my previous video, I described exactly how the banks, the government, and marketing are tricking you into making you poorer. Make sure to watch it next so that you can understand how to protect yourself from a system that's designed to keep you broke, even as a 6-figure earner. Thanks for watching.